Hi, this is Myra with Boutique Paint. Today I'm working on a tray, taking the silver tray, and I'm going to paint it, and then I'm going to use the paint inlays. Set that aside. A couple things that I didn't address in the paint inlay video that I did. I had a customer yesterday text me, and she's like, I followed the instructions perfectly. It's just not working. I don't understand. And so two things came to mind. And one of them was, especially on this newest one, it's really hard to tell the front from the back. The back has darker grid lines. That's one indication. And then if you look carefully, the print is darker on the other side. If you think you're going to get confused, especially after you've used it once, where this part of it will fade a little bit, you could write on the back, back, so that there's no getting confused. I did do, this was my start of my sample tray that I was experimenting with a different way to maybe do this that didn't work out, but I put the first one on correctly. The second one was upside down, and you can see that it did not transfer. So even I did it. So that's one. The other thing is the type of paint. This will not work with a paint, or won't work easily with a paint that has acrylic in it. So you really have to look at whatever paint you're going to use. A lot of the name brand paint companies, when the chalk style paint started becoming popular, they decided they were going to jump on the bandwagon and, do it too, which I think is kind of crappy because, these paint companies are small businesses, and the big companies are like, oh, let's get in there and make some money off this. The problem with that is a lot of them didn't change necessarily their formulation. All they did is made their paint flat. So that means that there's acrylic in the paint. And so you need to look to see if there is acrylic in the paint, because then it doesn't work as well, or it doesn't work at all. So I'm using DIY paint. There's, Annie Sloan Works. There's a whole bunch of different paints that do work with this. If you have any questions, talk to whoever you're buying your paint from and say, is there acrylic in this? And have you tried it with the new inlays? And that'll kind of, take that question, guesswork out of it. They should say on the label though. So I'm going to dry this real quick. I'm going to go ahead and put on a second coat. I use a foam brush when I want things to be smooth. That being said, when we're using the paint inlays, because you're putting the paper over it, it has a tendency to scrunch up the paint a little bit if you don't get it on there perfectly smooth. And what I mean by that, I'll pull this other tray over again. These are the folds that it made in the paint. And that was with using the brayer too, because I was going up the sides. But don't worry about that, because that can be sanded. You can get in there and sand some of those rough spots. And you can even sand over the paint inlay once it's in. So I'm going to dry this, and then we'll start the inlay process. Okay, so the next step is to determine what you want where. You know, do you want this little guy in the middle of your tray? But I think I'm going to go with the flowers. And something to be aware of is you got a sharp line where the pieces might meet together if you're doing like a piece of furniture. So I want that off. So I think I'm going to just cut this in half. So I think I'll do it kind of like that. Some of that might not come onto the tray. Then I might get sharp lines, but we'll give it a try and see. So I did not do this perfectly as far as the coat of paint because I knew we'd be putting on the next layer. And you want to put the paint on kind of thick. So I'm just going to get it on here and then I'll smooth it out a little bit. Okay, now I'll smooth it out. Probably want a little bit more on the bottom. Make sure that the entire thing, where you want the inlay to go, has got paint on it. You can also do this with clear coats. I suggest you do a sample board to see how your clear coat might work with the inlay. Just do a little sample. I've been using DIY's Big Top and it's been working really well. If I want to just, I can show you if I can find it. I did a an ornament. I was just kind of playing around, and the flower is actually a little too big for this, but this was with Big Top, and then I did the inlay right over it. Okay, looks like that will be good. Once again, the darker lines up. And because this is rounded, there is going to be a little bit of funkiness. And I'm okay with that. And when I say funkiness, I mean, you know, because you're going around in a round surface, there's going to be these folds. The most important thing is really try to get in to where the fold is, where the bottom of this is. Because if you don't, then you're going to have, like I got, once again, here, it did not take. Now, ignore all this heavy lines in there. I was trying an experiment with that one, and it didn't work, unfortunately. So that's why there's heavier lines in that particular piece, is because I was using a different product. I was using the paint frosting product on with the DIY paint. I wanted to see if I could lay that down and put the paint inlay over it, do the process, and then rehydrate the paint frosting enough so that I could dry it with the hairdryer and get the crackle finish. That did not work. Oops. Pulling off the underpaint when I pull it up. Don't do that. Okay, so I'm going to spray it with a spray bottle. You can also use your foam brush with water on it and just kind of move it around. You could use a sponge. I'm just going to do it this way. And then I'm going to take the brayer instead. You could also the foam brushes here, I'll show you with the foam brush. They work really well just for making sure. And I do have folds, but like I said, you're going around a surface, rounded surface. And grab my brayer real quick. And this really isn't doing much good around the top of this, but on your flat surfaces, this works really well. So we're going to let this dry, and then we'll reactivate it and pull it off and see what we ended up with. So this is dried. It's actually been a couple days since I did this, so it's very dry. So this will be interesting because most of us don't leave projects around. Well, that's probably not true. I start projects and come back to it, obviously, a couple days later. I just got through doing a desk using this paint inlay, and oh my gosh, it just is gorgeous. I'm so happy with the results. The problems that I had were simple. That is, I did not mark which side the painted side was, and on this particular transfer or inlay, it is really hard to see, especially when you're trying to get it done. But other than that, it was gorgeous. I'm having some of the paint take off with this, so I've got a little bit of the under pan showing. But pretty cool. So this is dry, and I started sanding already, and you can see that some of the silver is coming off, and that actually came off when I lifted the inlay. And then I'm going to go ahead and just sand down the rough spots. I'm using 220, and I'm using one of these cloth. They go on the sander, but I like these because they aren't stiff. So after I'm done using them with the sander, then I pull them off and keep using them for projects like this where you're trying to get a little bit more curved surface. I'm also going to pull back some of the paint and show the silver on the edge there on the rope. If it bothers you that some of the silver is showing, you could take, go to St. Finney's, or depending on where you're at. I don't know if you have St. Finney's across the country. Goodwill, secondhand stores. Pick up a wood tray, and you could do the same idea with this. I'm just gonna get all the dust out. And I go ahead and put it into it there. And I'm going to go ahead and wax it, and then I'm going to dark wax it just so that I can get some of this funkiness, the cracks and whatnot, to show a little bit more. So I'm just putting a little bit of the clear wax on. And then I decided, instead of using the wax, dark wax, I'm going to play a little bit with the dark decrepit dust. And what I usually do when I'm using this is, instead of putting it right in there, I'm just going to take a little bit and I'm going to put it to the side here. And then I'm going to get my wax brush, and I'm just going to pick up a smidge of that. And I'm just going to kind of go in here because I don't want it too dark. Just want to kind of show that a little bit. I just feel like I have a little bit more control with the dust because I can just put a smidge on there, and I'm using my dark wax brush. So it probably has a little bit of the dark wax on it, but it also has a little bit of wax so it can pull up the dust and move it around. And I'm going to grab a paper towel here, I think, and just kind of rub it back a little. And it behaves a lot like the wax in the fact that, so you can pull some of it back. It's just not as brown. It's not as dark of a color, and it's not as intense. If you want to take back a little bit more, just put some more clear wax on there, and it'll help take back more of the coloring. There we go. And we got a little dish. And you could put some soaps in there. You could put, if you're going to do soap, so I think I would put instead of wax, I think I would put a clear coat over the top, like of Big Top, something that'll help with the waterproofing a little bit more. Or you could put some lotions for a gift. That would be fun. And you can be creative. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions about any of these products that I've used, you can go to our website at www.boutiquepaint.com.